It's my privilege to welcome you to the CEO Breakfast and Strategy Series hosted by the Schneider School of Business and Economics at St. Norbert College. I am Brian Brees, the president. It's my great privilege and honor to welcome you here today. We're in for a real treat today with our speaker, Chris Hess. This marks the 22nd year of the CEO Breakfast and Strategy Series, and by my count, by the end of the year, we'll have hosted over 170 speakers in the lifespan of this programming. That's an incredible amount of talent and wisdom assembled in a single form. We're proud to have been able to offer this program for over 2 decades. This is the second year that the series has been held under the auspices of the Schneider School of Business and Economics. The mission of the Schneider School is in part to serve as the hub for business intelligence in Northeast Wisconsin, and I think this breakfast series fits perfectly into that vision and that goal, adding to the world-class programming that we already offer to our undergraduate and graduate students, the services provided in the Center for Exceptional Leadership, the Center for Business and Economic Analysis, and the Research Institute. I am pleased that all of you are here today to help us continue this important conversation about how best to drive the economic success of this region that we love so much. The CEO Breakfast Series provides area executives with the opportunity to hear from some of our top CEOs, and today is no different. The resource is brought to you by the generosity of our presenting sponsor, Myron Construction, the title sponsors, Johnson Financial Group, Davis Keithau Attorneys at Law, and Insight Publications. Today's sponsor is the American National Bank of the Fox Cities. Can you please give these sponsors a warm thank you? And to get us started, I'd like to invite us to a prayer. And so if we could, remembering that we're always in the presence of the Lord, and in this time of Lenten season of reflection and anticipation, I invite us to give thought and thanksgiving to those who go without, and for all that we might learn today in our conversation, and for all the work that we do in each in our own ways, in our places of work, in our communities, and our families. Together, we pray, bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts which are about to receive from thy bounty through Christ our Lord. Amen. Bon appetit.
Actually, it's good to have the freedom. Like, there's a lot of things you should be.
One of my great privileges as the president of St. Norbert College, I get to meet a lot of interesting people and a lot of alums. And Chris is no exception. It's been a privilege to get to know Chris. He is the president and CEO of Goodwill Industries of North Central Wisconsin. Since March of 2018, Chris has been leading an organization that lives out its mission of elevating people by eliminating barriers to employment through its programs, services, retail stores, and training centers across 35 counties. The reach of Goodwill is remarkable. Before joining Goodwill, Chris served as Vice President for Market Development and Sales for ThedaCare, a nonprofit healthcare organization that many of you know about. He also has held leadership roles with U.S. Venture and Genco, now FedEx Supply Chain. Chris serves on the board of directors of the Fox Cities Chamber of Commerce and the Boys and Girls Club of the Fox Valley, and has been named one of Wisconsin's most influential black leaders. There's many accolades that we could offer on Chris's behalf, but perhaps the one he's most proud of recently was bestowed upon him when he finished his 4th grade daughter's basketball season with a record of 43-3 as the coach. That's harder to do than you think. A native of Kenosha, Chris graduated from St. Norbert College and earned a master's degree in business administration from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. He and his wife, Jamie, who is here joining us as well, and 2 children live in Appleton. And today is a really important day that this goes well, okay? Because in addition to Chris's wife, his mother's here. So Jerry, it's good to have you here as well. Let's give a warm St. Norbert College welcome to Chris Hess.
Thank you, Brian, for that introduction, and thank you to St. Norbert College for all that you have meant to me in my leadership journey over these years. If you would have told me in 1998 when I was a freshman arriving at St. Norbert College that I'd be given this opportunity to speak, and you would have mentioned that in earshot of any of the professors or friends that I was hanging out with, everybody would have laughed. If you would have asked that same question 4 years later after being a member of that community and being fortunate enough to be inspired by the leaders that were on that campus, I think people would have still laughed, but there would have been less laughter because we were all so much better for our experience at St. Norbert College. So thank you, Brian, and the college for all that you've meant to me and leaders in our community. So today, as Brian mentioned, I am actually about to celebrate my 2-year anniversary with Goodwill, so it's kind of coming full circle. So I'm excited to share with you a little bit about my leadership journey and talk about what it means to be the real MVP and focus on what really matters. So, a warning, viewer discretion is advised. When Brian called me and asked me if I would do this, I said, yeah, I'd be glad to do it. I was super excited. And then I hung up the phone and the nerves set in. And I started to think about what I was actually going to tell a room full of leaders that probably knew more about leadership than I did. And I panicked a little bit because this is an actual image of my brain. So 50% of my brain is dedicated to normal human function, and the other 50% is dedicated to sports and cheesy sports metaphors. So the title of this speech, being the real MVP, does sound like a cheesy sports metaphor because it is. But it's not about sports, it's about leadership, it's about focusing on what really matters. And it's something that we've all learned throughout our career, and it's something that we probably learned if we were fortunate at a young age, and I want to talk about how important that is as we move organizations forward. So today, in today's world where we've all got to go to work in a few moments, and we're worried about coronavirus, and we're worried about fourth graders being on TikTok, and all the other things that we worry about, I thought it was important to put a slide together that just kind of tied up what we're going to talk about. So hopefully at the end of this 20-minute discussion that we're going to have, we're going to walk away with 3 things. We're going to learn what does it mean to be the real MVP, not just an MVP, but the real MVP. I am going to use a cheesy sports analogy to bring that home. How do we learn how to be the real MVP? And then how do we apply that to our organizations? And I'll share with you my journey and my leadership team's journey over the last 2 years at Goodwill to kind of illustrate that point. So cheesy sports metaphor part. So when I was thinking about what to talk about, I was watching classic ESPN. Again, 50% of my brain is dedicated to sports. And they were talking about some of the greatest moments in the history of the MVP award. And you know, I thought that really applied to leadership because at the end of the day, what we really want as leaders is to make an impact. We want to change the lives of people that we work with. We want to move our organizations forward. And we want to be recognized as somebody that was there and made a difference. And that to me is what being the MVP was all about. When I was growing up, shooting baskets in the cold on a day like today because we thought it was actually warm enough to put shorts on and go out there, you were pretending that you were shooting the last shot to win the finals for your team and that you're going to be named the MVP. And really, I don't think that that changes very much as leaders inside of our organization. We still want to win on behalf of our organization. And so while I was watching this documentary on the MVP, this story came up. And I don't know if you guys remember this exact moment or even know who this is. Does anybody actually remember this moment? Maybe you know it from an internet meme that came out of this moment. And that's what we do as a society. When cool things happen, we turn it into a meme on the internet. But if you were to Google, "you're the real MVP," you will see this photo and other photos, probably with tears, when Kevin Durant looked at his mom and said, "You're the real MVP." Now, the reason I picked this to kind of highlight the topic that we're talking about today is this young man at that point in time had reached what he thought was going to be the pinnacle. He was ascending as a basketball player. The story of Kevin Durant is actually pretty interesting. He went to college a year after LeBron James got to skip college and go directly into the NBA. And when Kevin Durant was at Texas, everybody was comparing him to LeBron James. He got into the league, something really strange happened to him. His team ended up moving from Seattle down to Oklahoma, and he actually had to hold the team together And he had two other superstars or budding superstars on that team in Russell Wilson and James Harden. And they were actually kind of the first super team in the NBA on accident. And what happened when he got this MVP award was they actually lost. They did not win the NBA Finals. Kevin Durant was not the best player in the NBA because LeBron James was there, but he was being recognized for being the MVP. And all of these emotions were hitting him when he was giving his speech. And he looked out and he came to this stark realization that the real MVP was actually sitting out in the audience. And the person that he was talking about was his mom. And this is important for two reasons. One, as Brian mentioned, my mom is here. And so anytime you can wrap your mom into a leadership speech in front of a whole bunch of people, good things happen, you get to live another year. It's great. The other reason that that's important is I think as leaders, sometimes we feel like we have to undergo a complex, rigorous process to find what real leadership is all about. We read complex journals, we enroll in classes, we read books, and all of that helps. But sometimes if we're just silent and we reflect, we've been taught what it is to be the real MVP from the very beginning. And being the real MVP isn't being the most athletic person, isn't being the smartest person in the room. It's being the person that focuses the team and the organization on your mission, your values, and your principles. And Kevin Durant came to this realization when he was standing in front of a whole bunch of people accepting an award that his mom was the real MVP because from a very early age, she taught him how to focus on his mission, on his values, and to have principles. So I'm going to attempt something that has not been done before. I am going to decode mom's metaphors and how they've taught us to be leaders over time, and hopefully this applies to some of your experiences with your moms or mentors that you've had in your life. So I'm going to tell you personal stories to talk about mission, values, and principles, and then I'm going to apply them to the Goodwill organization. So back in high school, I had a nemesis. This guy's name was Lenny. Every single thing that I did, Lenny did, and we had to compete over everything. We had to compete for playing time, we had to compete for attention, and we went about these things in completely different ways. I thought I should be the homecoming king. And I thought the rest of the school did too. And then the vote came out, and I'm totally over this, by the way. I'm almost 40 and I'm still talking about it. And then the vote came out, and I lost by several votes. And my brother, who was a couple of years younger than me, and he ran up to me and he's like, "Hey, dude, I gotta tell you, I voted for Lenny." And I'm like, what? Even my brother, it was like a Charlie Brown moment where I'm like, even my own brother is voting for Lenny. And he said, "Yeah, well, Lenny came to all of our classrooms and told us that he was going to beat anybody up that didn't vote for it." And I believed him, so I voted for him. So he's like, too bad. And I did what any mature 17-year-old male would do. I went home and I complained to my mom that I didn't win this homecoming award. And she looked at me, and this is the first metaphor that I'll talk about, and she said, "You know what, let him have his moment. Focus on what matters. Let them have their moment." And I think that that is a takeaway that we can apply to our organizations, because oftentimes we get caught up in the short-term wins or the short-term losses that come from a competitor or come from somewhere outside of our control, and we panic and we want to win so bad that we're willing to change focus and do something different. But Mom was there to tell me, focus on what matters. Keep it in perspective. You have a bigger mission. This is just a short-term thing. So that's mission. Values. This one was a little bit less mom code, because if you mess up on values, sometimes no matter where you are, hypothetically you could be back to school shopping in front of a whole bunch of people in the mall, and you could step out of line and you could get whacked upside of the head. And you don't really need to decode that. You can figure out that you're out of line really, really quickly. But my mom was a little bit more subtle than that, and for whatever reason, she never just said, "You should remember your values." She always pointed out the fact that we weren't raised by wolves. I don't know why it had to be you weren't raised by wolves, but it was. And the point there was, you have values, remember those values. And that's super important when you're leading an organization because everybody is looking at you as a leader, and your values turn into behaviors, which turn into actions, which ultimately add up to this thing that we call corporate culture that's super important when you're trying to move an organization forward towards a victory. All right, principles. So this one is a little bit more complicated. It's 1990 something, and I'm your average male student. And I would always constantly come into the house and say, hey mom, I want to buy some Air Jordans. It's the 90s. Hey mom, I want a starter coat. And I would always close my argument for this purchase with this following phrase that always doomed any and every single request that had this in it. Mom, I want a starter coat because everybody else is doing it. Mom, I want Jordans because every single person on the team has Jordans. And she would turn and say to me, and this drove me nuts because it had nothing to do with what I was asking for, 10,000 flies can't be wrong. And I'm like, Mom, I am not talking about poop, I'm talking about Jordans. Why won't you let me get these things? And the reason was I wasn't making a principle-based decision. I was making a decision because I saw everybody else was doing this thing. They were buying these coats. I did get a starter coat, by the way, because everybody stopped doing it and it went on clearance. And I got a starter coat. But the point is, when you look around and you see what other people are doing in business, sometimes we're really, really tempted to make the same decision. But if it doesn't line up with our principles, it can take us off track. So being the real MVP is really all about keeping your mission in mind, living your values every day, and coming up with principles to move the organization forward. So let's talk about how this actually plays out at a real organization. So moving away from the lifelong lessons that mom teaches you and that other people in your life have taught you and applying it to an organization like Goodwill. So when I got to Goodwill, I was told two things by my board. One was, hey, congratulations, you're the external candidate. We're hiring you for this job. We're super excited. You're going to take us in a new direction. We hope you're excited. We're excited. We're going to stay out of your way. And we don't want you to mess up the culture. And I said, okay, cool. What's the culture? And they said, we don't know. Go find out. And so I went and started asking people about the mission. And you would think a mission-based organization would be really, really easy to figure out what the mission is. But it's not. Because everybody has a different interpretation of what that mission can be, and it's important as leaders that we have a conversation with the people that we work with so that we can get on the same page with mission. So we started to survey all of our people, having one-on-one conversations. We talked to our board, we talked to our national association, and we arrived at a central mission of elevating people by eliminating barriers to employment. This is probably the most important thing that I did with my leadership team in the first 6 months of being on board at Goodwill. Having a mission and having a why in today's business environment is a competitive advantage. If you can tie your mission to what you do and you can articulate that to consumers, and probably more importantly to the people that are inside of the organization actually doing the work, the rest of everything seems to kind of fall into place. The next thing that we wanted to do, and we were a new leadership team, I was a brand new CEO, never done this before, we'll probably never do it again. And we said, okay, so we're new, we're driving change through the organization. What do we need to do to bring people along? And this talk isn't about change management, but a big part of leadership and being the MVP is dealing with change and ambiguity. And we thought that it was super important that we come up with some guiding principles on how we were going to make decisions together as an organization. And I could tell you from experience that the second that you come up with these guiding principles, some magical things happen. One is people know what to expect from you as a leader. They go, okay, I know how this guy is going to react. I know when this situation comes up that these are the guiding principles and this is how we're going to apply them to this situation. The other magical thing that happens is you empower your people to make decisions on their own without you. And you give them the tools to do that. And you say, look, here are our guiding principles. At Goodwill, they're really, really simple. We practice mission-based decision making at all time. That's the first principle. So anything that we do, We ask what the impact of the mission is with that decision. We want to attract and retain talented team members. We want to know our business. We want to focus on the experience of our team members and our customers. We want to innovate and grow to impact the needs in our community. And we want to be good stewards of the community's resources. So we ask ourselves every single time that we have a business decision to make, how does this apply to the principles? And then we make the decision. So we've got the mission in mind, we use principles. And then there's values. So the values were a little bit harder to arrive at because when I got there, we had spent a bunch of money on expensive marketing posters and things that were on the wall that had our values on them. The interesting thing was when you went and you talked to people about the values, they didn't tell you what was on the poster. It's a big disconnect, right? So we went on listening sessions and talked to people and said, you guys know what our mission is, you know how we're going to make decisions. What should our values be? How are we going to operate in this Goodwill family? Tell us what that looks like. And we went to all 28 stores, talked to every member of the stores that we could, and they picked the values that are on top of these little circles that support the guiding principles. So they said, we're going to care for people, we're going to be great Goodwill team members, we're going to own the business, we're going to be accountable, we're going to think big and take action, we're going to create an impact and celebrate the possible. And by doing this, we really unlocked a lot of potential inside of the organization. And probably most importantly, we all got on the same page and we're all prepared to deal with the many changes that we face as an industry. So just to give you a little bit of background on what we're faced with as an organization, we are in a constantly changing competitive space for donated goods retail. When I took the job, there were 164 Goodwills. There's now 156. And the reason for that are things like ThredUp and Poshmark and Facebook Marketplace. And we're all competing for your attention and your donations so that we can fuel our mission. We take those donated goods, create job training and opportunity for people, and harvest every bit of value out of that to the tune of 88 cents on every dollar goes directly into mission. And we run an organization of 1,300 people, 28 stores on the rest of that dollar. But people can now go out and do kind of the value creation on their own through their smartphone. And so we had to tell people, and we have to tell people every day who we are, what our mission is, how we're making principled decisions, how we're going to be good stewards of their resources when they give them to us. And we believe through research and through looking at this kind of next generation of consumer that our mission will be incredibly relevant to tomorrow and today's consumer. So this work was actually fundamental for us to actually even compete from a business standpoint. And most importantly, it focused our mission, and we've had tremendous impact on people's lives as a result of being focused on this, because at the end of the day, that's really what we're all about. So that's kind of my leadership story and my cheesy sports metaphor in about 15 minutes. The results that we've experienced over the last 2 years doing this, when I got there with my leadership team, we looked and we were facing 5 years of transaction decline and 5 years of sales decrease. By making this change and focusing everybody, we were able to stop the decline in year one. In year two, we grew about 3%, and this year, it looks like we're going to grow even further beyond that. So focusing on what really matters, your mission, your values, and your guiding principles can help you on your own leadership journey, but can also help all of your organizations. So thank you very much. I believe we have time for questions about anything except my childhood. I coach fourth graders, so I can wait you guys out.
Chris.
Yes, sir.
So, I think all of us as leaders are putting a lot of time and effort into what you've got on the slide deck. Maybe just talk through things, in teams. Let's use cheesy metaphors, right? So, locker rooms, everything's great when you're winning. What about the tough days? What about the days you're losing? How is culture helping you get through those tough days?
Yeah. That's a really good question, because there are a lot of tough days, especially when you're faced with fierce competition. You do take a lot of short-term losses, right? It's keeping everybody focused on what that mission ultimately is. For us, we're blessed because it's super easy. It's one of my favorite things about Goodwill. If you're having a bad day and you're really taking it on the chin in a certain area, you open your door, you go down the hallway, and you see the mission living inside of your halls. And I always tell people, if we don't do what we do really, really well, we have two people that we love on our campus, Dan and Megan. I'm like, Dan and Megan, go home. And so that really focuses everybody and allows us to rally around the thing that we all have in common, and that's our mission.
I'm sure that going through this process, there's people that were working for Goodwill that didn't align with the vision and mission that you were working towards. Talk through what happened with those individuals. Did you feel like they self-selected out? Was there some changes that had to be made structurally to get to this place?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I have a completely new leadership team. So part of that was the nature of the process. So there was some self-selecting out. I think as a leader, especially when you're trying to focus on mission, values, and principles, and you make a stand and you say, this is what we're going to do, it makes it really, really clear for people to decide if they're in or out. So there wasn't this, well, I'm going to wait it out, maybe in 18 months, maybe I'll figure out if I want to do something different. We were fortunate enough to be able to arrive at this early and gave people a clear picture of this is where we're going. Do you want to come with or not? And I think it's okay for people to say that they don't want to do this, and it's not a reflection on what they did in the past. But I think it's healthy for them and for the leadership of the organization to have this conversation around, this is what we're going to do. Are you in or you're out? And most people were in. What I love about the transformation that we went through is we've had very little turnover beyond kind of the key executive rank inside of the organization. So that tells me that the people believe in where we're headed and what we're doing. But it's tough. But I love being transparent with people and telling them this is where we're going and allowing them to have really clear expectations of what it's going to take.
Chris, can you just, since we are, I guess you consider us all leaders here at the employers that we work at, how can we support you with your mission? I mean, Goodwill's been a name that's been in my community for as long as I can remember, but with our employers and us here, how can we support your mission?
That's a great question. I will give you $5 later. So we've been on this journey of measuring the impact that all of you in this room can have on the Goodwill mission. And we're elevating people by eliminating barriers to employment. And that does not mean just working with folks with what I'm just going to call traditional barriers. So it's not always somebody in a wheelchair. It's not always somebody with CP. It could be somebody that has high functioning autism or is dealing with depression and hasn't been able to return to the workforce. It could be veterans coming back into the workforce. If they have a barrier, we're going to try to help and try to upskill them with the skills that they need. So you can help a couple of different ways. One is donating. Donating your used household goods, your apparel. I think sometimes people think that the apparel has to be in perfect condition. It doesn't. We go through everything that we get, and we have a disposition for even things with stains or rips. We'll cut them into shop rags. We'll sell them to textile recyclers. There's a bunch of different stuff that we can do. We keep about 50 million pounds out of the landfill annually, just through the donations that are coming to us. So donate, because when you do, we can create 3.5 hours of job training and opportunity in your community when we get that donation. If you purchase something inside of our retail stores, that's about 1.5 hours based on normal ticket transaction prices of job training and opportunity. So the double whammy is if you donate and you shop, it's 5 hours of job training and opportunity. From an employer standpoint, we do a lot of job training We'd love to partner with employers. You guys need talent. We've got folks that sometimes get forgotten about, and we can train them to meet your needs. We've got folks inside of organizations like Thrivent that are doing financial data entry. We've got folks that are working at places like Zupa's and other food service places. We really run the gamut of training. So we have a team that can sit with employers and actually work on a training program where we can upskill folks with barriers that sometimes get forgotten about. And it's important, the unemployment rate for somebody with a barrier is like 3 times the normal rate of unemployment. And we all need hands right now, and we've got those folks that we're working with. So those are some of the major ways. Thanks for that question. Robin Gruner.
What happened to Lenny?
Yeah.
Where's Lenny now?
That's a good
Everybody's
question.
wondering. But
Lenny, I think Lenny is, I don't know.
my real question though is,
Yeah.
you guys have also implemented some things, I think, that kind of go with the change in environment of the retail space. So talk maybe about the online presence
Yeah.
and some of those smaller boutique types of locations that you've created that I think really move along with what you see in the retail world.
Yeah. So growing up, I think that I viewed Goodwill as a place where you would go to shop if you didn't have the means to shop somewhere else. That is a huge misnomer. Actually, there are huge deals and treasures that you can find inside of our stores that anybody in this room would be happy to find and wear or put in their house. So we have done a really good job of pulling those donations out and setting them to the side and making it easier for you to find them in the stores. So we've created boutique areas where everything's sized and colored, and you can kind of go through in a more upscale thrifting type environment. And those environments have gone over really, really well. The other thing that we've done is we do have an online presence now. We had tried selling apparel online and kind of backed off of that, and now we're listing apparel and household goods and other treasures on shopgoodwill.com. That's an eBay style site where you can actually do live auctions. There's jewelry out there that's IGA certified and all sorts of different things that we get donated that we then make available via e-commerce. So we're changing with the times. I think the next evolution is more omni-channel listings for the internet and potentially trying to unlock the power of the individual donor, much like some of the other competitors have over the last 18 months. So, good question. Anybody else?
Let's give Chris a round of applause. I'd like to thank Chris for being here tonight, but I'd also like to, Jerry, thank you for giving us this MVP. Chris, thanks for being that MVP for us. And I think I can say for this whole room, there's nobody in here that would vote for Lenny today. More importantly, thank you for bringing to Goodwill values and mission and principles and elevating people by eliminating barriers. What a beautiful mission. So can we give Chris 2 things today, another round of applause, but also please donate and shop at Goodwill. Let's give Chris a round of applause. Thank you, Chris. If you'd like a copy of today's presentation, let us know in the survey you're going to get in the email. Give us feedback on today's presentation. Also let us know if you'd like a copy of today's presentation. You can also find Lisa Gray, who can make a copy of the presentation available to you. We hope to see you at our next CEO breakfast on April 9th. April 9th, boy, we're already in March, aren't we? April 9th at St. Norbert College. Greg Lindermanstrand, president of Weidert Group, will present Surviving the Great Recession, a Story of Business Reinvention. Thank you for being here and supporting the series. We'll see you April 9th. Have a great day.